with Julian on the brown note and a review of Citizen Vigilante, currently, as of this moment, the most controversial film in the world. Directed by Uwe Boll. Now, a few years ago, we had The Sound of Freedom, which was the very first film that had ever been made about a kidnapped woman being sold into sexual slavery. Except it wasn't. So there were two. So it became this cause celeb about an issue that Hollywood wouldn't touch and that Hollywood tried to squash the film. The only two problems is that both were completely wrong. There have been many films about young white girls in places like America being trafficked to Latin America and being sold into sexual slavery. The last Rambo film was exactly that story. Have you seen the Taken films? Like, the idea that this was the first film to be about, white girls being taken by gangsters and sold into sexual slavery and then someone coming to rescue them is just not true. But the other thing was that Hollywood squashed the film. What actually happened is, I think one of the big studios bought out Fox Searchlight, and they had 20 films on the books that they never intended to release. One of the reasons being that they would have to spend, another 20 or 30 million on marketing if they did decide to release it and have overall costs of, 50 or 60 million to release a film. Which, with Jim Caviezel as the star who had been problematically spouting MAGA stuff on the campaign trail for other films, it's understandable that it never got a release. So neither of those was true. But now we've got Uwe Boll and Citizen Vigilante, which is also got a Jim Caviezel of his era, Arnie Hammer coming back, which is quite something. So Arnie Hammer went through years of being cancelled through very horrific claims of sexual deviancy and cannibalism, which I think ended up all being dismissed. And obviously he was up to dodgy stuff, but nothing remotely illegal, and he didn't eat anyone as far as I know. But he's not been featured in much. So he was in the, I thought, underrated Death on the Nile as the lead guy in it. And this blew up when the film came out, and they airbrushed him off the posters. Even though he's like the lead guy, next to Poirot, they actually excised his presence from the release of that film. Uwe Boll is a very interesting guy. Through the early 2000s, he's released 50 films. And I really appreciate his gonzo filmmaking, that he does this indie filmmaking thing and doesn't care what anyone else thinks. He was famous in the early 2000s for having a number of films on Rotten Tomatoes with 0%, like Blood Rain and Alone in the Dark, being some of the worst films that have been made this century. Noted for their incredibly poor scripts and screenplays and amateurishness and so on. Since then, over the last 10 years, he's made some films that have got better receptions or have been more competent in their making and looked closer to being a normal standard fare film. But he hasn't hit the zeitgeist quite so bullseye as Citizen Vigilante. His own politics are, I guess you would call them populist right-wing to a degree, but he's also very anti-war, anti-Hollywood, but populist right-wing in general. He's anti-immigrant, certainly. And this film has caused an enormous fuss because it features Arnie Hammer as a vigilante in Europe fighting the brown immigrant crisis of rape and killing those people. Very, very contentious for a filmmaker to tackle a subject. I'm a problematic troublemaker myself, so I do like people poking around in issues they shouldn't. And Germany banned the film effectively by not giving it an age certificate. Elon Musk, the cringiest man next to Karl Stefanovic, of course had to jump on. The Attention Via had to jump on board and posted the whole film on Twitter. Yes, it's been really, really hard. It's been cancelled massively because I saw it just downloading it in 5 minutes. So yeah, you can't see this film. Germany is historically very touchy when it comes to anything like this. So no one else, as far as I know, has banned it. It's not a banned film. It's about as banned as Karl Stefanovic's interview with Tommy Robinson. Now, is Uwe Boll trolling here? Because he's got the hard right and Elon Musk championing a film about a sociopathic billionaire evil landlord. Did he watch the film? Because that's kind of you, kind of like an imagined version of you. I think this film's really interesting because you don't quite know 100% where he's coming from. The end is the only part of the film where it really tips its hand far too far. But in the opening scene, you get a recreation of the Ukrainian girl on the train in America that was stabbed in the neck. You get that. It's obviously what it's trying to be, and you think this is going to be the film. But it really isn't for probably 80% of its duration. It's only at the end, the last sort of 20% of the film, where it really goes full on into that. And that's going to be the most challenging part for most people to get into. I don't care about spoilers here. It's not a suspense film. But the middle stretch of the film, which is most of the film, is not too bad. It's kind of interesting. Certainly, the vigilante hero, who's shown in YouTube clips as, you know, people saying we need this guy in our country, who say a bunch of immigrants are accused of rape and get off in court, he will go and kill them. So it's half a Death Wish film. So Death Wish is still a really interesting film, but the one big part of this film that is different to Death Wish is in Death Wish, the guy's own daughter and wife were the victims. Whereas it's never established why Armie Hammer's character feels like he does. He's got no skin in the game. He's an American, very wealthy American landlord. The fact that they've made him a landlord is so interesting. So I thought, like, the best parts of this film, like the worst parts of this film, are when he's delivering to the camera the dialogue about how our courts and our politicians have let us down, because it's such trite dialogue. It really doesn't work. But the bits about the film that do work are when there is some really good stuff investigating his persona as a landlord and as a vile rich person, which I love. Like, he goes to a brothel, and in the back of my mind, maybe I'm giving Uwe Boll far too much credit here, but the idea that this guy will be going to a brothel which is clearly staffed mainly by ethnic people, to be interesting. There was a lot of times where I was thinking, what is he going for here? But the fact that he actually walks through a prostitute that he's seeing, asking her about whether she opens the windows when she's had a shower, complaining about the mold on the walls because he's the landlord of the building. That's where the film really, I thought the film was really at its best in defining his character. And also, like, he goes into the office to talk about how to best deal with tenants that don't pay rent, and goes around his various properties taking pictures of the damage and stuff like that. I thought all of that was quite interesting. And I don't know why he could have easily set this guy up to be a massive hero. But he's kind of a sociopathic evil murderer. He kills a lot of police. In some very violent scenes, he kills like a dozen police. He's also shown, like, after that initial bit where you see a brown person attacking a white blonde woman with a knife, you get a scene where two white guys, who are obviously locals, or at least analogous to being white Europeans, are trying to date rape two girls in a bar by putting drugs in their drink. And that was interesting. I was like, how does this all fit together? I don't know that it does, but I did find some of those scenes interesting. There's still some of the layover from Uwe Boll's amateurish past. For instance, the BBC journalist is pretty terrible. Armie Hammer I thought was fine, but if they're making him out to be a hero, he comes across more like Patrick Bateman, like a dead-eyed, not funny version of Patrick Bateman, but definitely a sociopath. And his interactions with the victims' families, where he'll go and ask them, do you want justice, didn't really ring true so much for me. The most controversial scene is the final sequence, where he goes to. So it's analogous to the SCAF case in Australia, but there's a group of 5 ethnic boys who rape a girl, and she's a white European girl, and they get off on the trial because the judge says they weren't allowed fair integration into his country and so on, which causes the kill crazy rampage at the end. But what's really interesting is he not only listens to what they're saying, but he also executes, like, the 18-year-old daughter for saying that online that Westerners dress in a manner that encourages them to be raped and so on like that. All of which was kind of interesting because I don't know, he could have made this guy just like a Rambo-like hero, but he's so problematic on so many levels. I mean, maybe the people that are celebrating this film would not regard executing a young teenage girl for posting online that Westerners dress provocatively and deserve to be raped. Maybe they think that's fine, or the mother and father being executed. Maybe they do think it's fine. And the final sort of spiel he gives, your governments are letting you down, your courts are letting you down, is all very trite. Could have been a lot stronger. But, you know, I don't think this is... I think this is a very interesting film. And I couldn't quite get a line on exactly where he was going. I thought they tipped their hand far too much with that end sequence. And then following it with something... Do you know what? This film is kind of between American Psycho and V for Vendetta. He kind of reminded me of the V for Vendetta guy as well. And it's not in the same league as that film or that character. But it's kind of between the two. I thought there was enough. There is amateurishness across the board, but there is enough that is of interest here. And the character was kind of a deeply flawed version of a hero. Maybe when Elon is sitting awake at night, he imagines himself in a Batman outfit rescuing blonde Ukrainian women from Islamic people for some reason. So it doesn't work all the way through. You can certainly see it very easily if you want to. The end bit with the family and the executions and then the speech are definitely button pushing. I'm okay with button pushing. And it's going to become a cool celeb. They're going to tell you it's banned everywhere. Uwe Boll's films don't get shown in the cinema. They never have done. They've usually been straight to video, if that. Most people have never seen a Uwe Boll film. So he's obviously from that political side of the spectrum to have made this film in the first place. I don't like his use of digital. Like some of the shots, some of the trolley shots of the buildings of Europe, not a country, it's just Europe, are really nice for him. Actually really professional looking. Other shots where it's a narrower focus just look like really cheap TV. Which is a problem. Like there's shots of Arnie Hammer in the dark, which look quite cool. But then when it's like normal daylight and everything, it just looks really cheap. But there's certainly enough for me to have a good think about this film and what he was actually going for. Because I can't quite work it out, even though it's obvious, whether he was fully on board with this or making some kind of commentary on the entire issue. Very interesting anyway. So I'm going to give Citizen Vigilante a 6 out of 10 for prurient interest.